Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I'm here with Doug Tenaple and Andy Chamberlain. I put links to both their channels in the description. We're going to have a little discussion, debate on pro-life versus pro-choice, the abortion argument. I was originally planning on debating Andy. Andy and I wanted to do a debate on something, and a lot of our positions align. I'm pro-choice, Andy's pro-choice. I was going to take the pro-life side of the argument because I am open to the pro-life argument, and I feel like I have a good grasp of the pro-life argument, but I really am not pro-life. So I brought Doug in to argue the pro-life side of the debate. I have some questions here that we're going to start with. We'll let Doug go first. Doug can give his position, his pro-life position, and then I want Andy to steelman his position, and then we'll go to the pro-choice position, and Doug can steelman that. So Doug,
Sure.
you're up first.
My position I'm pro-life because I believe that human beings are every person is an individual. They're rare. Rare as in when you're gone, you will go extinct. There will never be another one like you. Not even close. And it's because of that identity of who we are and how individual we are that is where the idea of the sacredness of life comes from. That is, we're not sacred because we're just another human, another mammalian species walking around, and we're sacred as in there's thousands of us. I think the individual and individual rights flow from individually being sacred. So when you destroy an unborn life at any stage, you destroy that person completely. That is, they will never exist. If Andy here is aborted, he would never have existed, and the world will be without Andiness. So I'm actually fighting for my opponent to even be able to be here to speak. And I think it would be a horror if any one of us were aborted. And I understand that there's a lot of people aborted, and those people are blotted out, and it's upsetting, and I think it's terrible. And I think in where we're at in society and in philosophy, I think we ought to be fighting for their right to exist. So I'm for the civil rights of the unborn.
So do you have any exceptions, like IVF, rape? A lot of times the pro-life position is pro-life with caveats.
Sure. I don't give a caveat to rape and incest. I would give a caveat to, because of the pro-life position, would be where two lives will likely be killed, it would be okay to kill one, because that would allow that other person to exist. So if both of them are going to die, obviously, if the mother's going to die and the baby isn't far enough along, they will probably die also. That would be the only justification I can see for abortion.
Okay, so life of the mother is your exception, your one exception. Okay.
I think it's very, very rare, obviously, but I'm just saying I could see that in that case.
So Andy, you want to steelman his position?
Sure. So I guess my understanding of the philosophical argument here is that you believe that the life of a child is valuable, probably from conception. Is that? Yeah. So the life of a person, I guess, is valuable starting at conception, and therefore, terminating that is murder. And you believe in the I guess you didn't explicitly say sanctity, but you said that life is sacred, that every individual is unique, and so when you destroy someone, you're destroying a unique individual. And the core of the argument is that the unborn child is morally valuable, and so that's terminating that is murder, and there's very little that could make up and justify that murder. And you said maybe the only thing that would do that is if the other option is the mother dying. So that sounds right, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about my position.
So Andy,
Okay.
just to clarify here, we're using the word murder, and murder means the unlawful killing. Technically, abortion is
Okay.
legal right now.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. I guess if we're using murder legally,
but
so we could
we
say,
understand that Doug is conceptualizing it as it should be the same as murder, that it should be
yeah.
an
Okay.
unlawful killing. Correct, Doug?
Yeah, I believe it is actually murder because my definition of murder isn't just what the law says is
Yeah.
murder, because they might be okay with killing all kinds of people. It's the unjustified killing of innocent human life
Is
what I
killing
call murder.
is killing terrorists murder?
No, because it's not unjustified.
Okay, so
Unjustified
you're saying
killing.
justified killing. Okay. So,
Unjustified killing of innocent human life is murder.
okay.
Okay. So
So you agree with that? That's your position, Doug. You're in agreement. He stated your position clearly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andy?
all
Well
right.
done. Well
Do I
done.
say my position now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So I suppose there's basically two layers to pro-life and pro-choice, and this gets confused a lot. Like, I asked my mom whether she was pro-choice or pro-life, and her answer was she said she's pro-life, but she's actually pro-choice legally, and that's like a distinction that we need to make, is the legal and the moral. Or I think it's better to say policy and moral, but same thing more or less. So I am actually pro-choice on both levels, but I think it's not very fruitful to try to argue or try to change someone's mind about the moral level, especially if they're coming from a place of like religious morality in some sense, because that takes way more than a debate. And so I'd mainly argue that from the legal stance, I'm pro-choice because you can't really prevent women from getting abortions, but you can at least make it safe when they do get abortions. We know that countries with pro-life policies have higher abortion rates. Now, that's not causal. That is because of economic prosperity, probably. And more economically prosperous countries are going to have less abortions because there are less situations in well-functioning societies which would merit abortions from the mother's perspective, I suppose. They're more confident that they can raise the child, or they're more confident in the foster care system, or there's a lower rate of single mothers, or whatever. For whatever reasons, economically prosperous societies have lower abortion rates. Great. So I'm not saying it's causal, but what it does demonstrate is that pro-life policies do not really prevent abortions, and they might be able to marginally decrease them. But I think that the detriment to freedom and social good and lives of mothers, because I think it's about 0.3 or 0.4% of illegal abortions result in the death of the mother. And in America, that would end up meaning about 2,000 per year, 2,000 women per year dying from illegal abortions. So given all that stuff and the fact that you won't really be able to diminish the abortion rate much by making it illegal, I am pro-choice legally. Now, I'm also pro-choice morally. And I think that's much harder to convince someone of, but the argument there is basically that I hold the rather uncommon position, I suppose, that life does not really have any inherent value in the first place. I think that life has instrumental value, and this would be contextualized in the paper that we were talking about earlier. But it's basically my moral basis that I've argued for is that we ought to seek ethics or pursue ethics itself. So it's kind of a meta morality. I don't know what to call it exactly. I've been calling it denialism, like nihilism, but with, anyway, fun little play on words. But denialism is basically, I centered it around nihilism because nihilism is the main objection to the argument, but the argument is just that we don't know what ought to be done. We need to figure out what ought to be done to maximize the chance that what ought to be done is actually done. And therefore, we should, for the time being, center morality itself around finding what morality is, about seeking moral realism. So that's my moral basis. So that does not result in these tricky situations that occur when you value life inherently, because we have these, if you say life is valuable, or even just like human life is valuable, if you're that specific, you still get these fringe cases of the beginning and the end of life. where you have abortion, is that okay? Terminally ill patients, doctor-assisted suicide, is that okay? These are fringe cases of life's value, and that's why they're controversial, because it's not clear if you say that life is valuable, whether it's valuable right at the beginning or right at the end or whatever. But
So just to
about it.
clarify here, you're saying you're saying that your morality doesn't say that life has inherent value in it. You're saying that we should find morality through some sort of empirical method. Does that mean that you could go either way on the abortion question if we found out one way was more moral than the other? How would you determine something like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, currently it just looks like pro-choice policies are associated with better functioning societies.
Okay.
And I know it's a weak reason. It is a weak reason. I'll grant that. But I don't really have any reason to be pro-life, because that comes from the idea that life is inherently valuable. That comes from the idea that there is inherent value to the unborn child, and that killing them is murder, and or killing them is terrible. Let's just say that, and that is inherently wrong. But that position just doesn't come up when you don't value life directly. So,
all right, Doug,
All right.
you've got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, let me take a crack at this.
I was waiting for someone to say sociopath. I just saw it. That's good.
Yeah. So let me see if I get you right. Is that it seems like if you say that you said that there was because there's no inherent value to life, that we find a higher value in exercising ethics that are outside of just pursuing life, but there's quality of life things. There is prosperity. There is you made a case that societies that practice abortion are more advanced.
Societies
go ahead
that
and
have
let him
pro-choice policies.
Societies that pro-choice policies is usually a sign of cultural or civilizational prosperity, and that they function better and they do better. That to remove abortion would create more deaths by illegal abortions, because people are going to get them anyways. That I'm trying to think of what else you said. It's hard to. I'm not going against what you said. I'm trying to find the way that you said it, finding the thread of why you're pro-choice. But I think I got it. The biggest reason why you're pro-choice is that you don't find that inherent value in the life itself. Yeah. Which would argue for why you'd want to keep it. So if I was going to make a straw man argument for why life has no inherent value, it's that we're a mass of molecules, and life is mysterious, and we don't know exactly what gives us value, and you can't empirically demonstrate it. You can't weigh the value of a life. It's abstract. So maybe the best thing that you can do is just try to have as good of a life for the living as possible. And given that the abortion, like euthanasia, takes place on the fringes, we're arguing over the abstract beginning of life, of unborn things that we cannot see, and we cannot know if they're ensouled, and to the end of life, where someone's suffering can be so great that maybe the suffering on the edges aren't worth the fight, because the damage could be greater even than what the individual's already experiencing. Is that strong manning enough? Steel manning? Steel manning.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning.
Okay, yeah, I you're saying strong manning?
Yeah, I thought you were saying straw manning.
Yeah.
I was like, it's so close to straw.
It's using it's called the strong man instead of the straw man, or the steel man instead of the straw man. It's the idea that you're trying to come up with something stronger than just, impugning the other side,
Yeah, I don't know. It sounded a bit more like esoteric than what I would normally go with. But I think my main thing is just that, okay, here's the thing. So if you say that life doesn't have inherent value, does that justify killing other people? It's a consequentialist framework. It's teleological, which means you have to consider the consequences of actions. So I've seen a lot of people in the chat saying, "Oh, let's just kill all the poor people because that's like better for society or something." No, that would be terrible for society because humans have feelings, and we would feel terrible about that, and that would definitely not be beneficial to like philosophical discourse and scientific advancement, which are the two main things that are like that I see as important for the pursuit of ethics.
But what
So,
about humans that don't feel it? If that's your one of your criteria is it's
well,
terrible because people have feelings, but the people who do it don't have feelings.
right. So I'm saying that it's bad because like the effect of mass murder and genocide on the pursuit of ethics, especially if it's justified by the pursuit of ethics, of course that's going to be super negative on the pursuit of ethics. So no, we shouldn't do that. And
But all of those instances are done in the name of ethics. I mean,
I guess.
yeah. They believed it was moral to get the free labor of subhumans. It was moral. They believed it was moral to wipe the Jews off the earth. I mean, that is if you're using cultural ethics or
yeah, and
or
those were
majorities.
terrible things that definitely did not help philosophical discourse and scientific advancement. So yeah.
Are your personal ethics a good place to find out what the criteria for life would be?
What do you mean?
Well, if you before you said people have feelings and people feel that it's okay to do this. So if they feel it's okay to do it, is it okay to do it?
No, I was just talking about feelings in that they are relevant to whether in my framework it would be justified to kill lots of people who we have empathetic connections with, like someone in the chat said, let's just kill all the poor people, like obviously sarcastically, but
Andy, just to stop you here for a second, you put forward two arguments, and
okay, yeah,
Doug is obviously zeroing in on your weakest argument. I think,
Yeah.
like the idea that humanity.
It was his first argument. I'll get onto the second one too.
Right.
But first,
just your first argument is a utilitarian argument. Basically, you're saying that there's without abortion being legal, there's more suffering from these abortions that women have that are illegal. Correct? That's one argument. Your second argument is life has no value anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's just the two layers of it, because that's the moral layer and the policy layer.
No,
I understand that. I'm just saying I think one argument is obviously much stronger than the other argument. So I don't know where we go. And Doug, I'll have your input on this. I mean, if we're both starting from a place where life has no value at all, like where exactly do we go from
here? It
here?
has instrumental value.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So we appear to have some ability to pursue ethics, and the idea of pursuing ethics, the reason why we should do it is because it makes it more likely that what ought to be done is actually done. And I should say that like I don't expect there is anything that ought to be done, but I can't be absolutely certain, so I retain the obligation to try to do what ought to be done, because if there's nothing, then whatever. If there's something, I need to pursue that, so the weight falls on the side of pursuit. And so essentially humans have instrumental value to that because we have the ability to pursue ethics, and currently it seems like we're the smartest things around. And so we need to keep going and try to figure that out.
When you say instrumental value, though, you sound like you're saying somebody has more utility than other people. That's why people in the chat are saying kill the poor, because you're basically saying, yeah, poor people don't have the same utility as other people.
Okay, well, I don't know if
so what is the instrumental value that you're making?
Just like unintelligent or something, but
do unintelligent people, does an invalid have as much value as the smartest man in the world?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. So again, like
I volunteer for the Special Olympics, and there's people who can barely walk, they can barely think, they don't even know what the sport's about.
Once again,
compare that to a brilliant guy.
Right.
Does he have less value? What percentage, if there is one molecule less value?
So So the value might be marginally different, but effectively they're the same because we value each other, like, even if it's not rational, even if it's just because we feel like we have value, we feel like that. And since we're the ones trying to figure out ethics, we need to function properly as a society. And so
Mhm.
if you start saying, well, these people don't have any value, or if you start saying, well, let's just kill this group of people because they don't have the same direct impact, like, you can't just kill everybody except for the philosophers and expect the philosophers to survive.
Mhm.
So 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 no, we need a generally well-functioning society, which is why my system practically turns into pretty much the same kind of thing as just a basic utilitarian framework. It's slightly different in a couple of nuanced ways, mainly that utilitarianism generally will value life directly, and so you still get problems with stuff like abortion. But functionally, it ends up being very similar to a lot of moralities that people hold anyway, because it's consequentialist, it's teleological. We have a goal, we want to achieve that goal, so we have to consider what the consequences of any action we do are on that goal. And killing lots of people because they don't have as direct of an impact on the goal as other people do is not it's detrimental to the goal,
I'm saying
right there.
killing any of them.
Sure, yeah. But the difference between something like that and an unborn child is basically that people have demonstrated that they are capable of really not empathizing too much and not having too much of a problem with that, because plenty of people don't have a problem with killing unborn children. Um, I'd be hard pressed to find many people who are like, "Oh yeah, just kill the people who are disabled. No,
Yeah.
that's fine. Go ahead." I'd be hard pressed to find too many people that think like that. I'm sure there are, but an awful lot fewer than those who say it's okay to kill an unborn child. And so it's more of like the effect on the goal, and the fact that
But because
people.
they do it, Andy, doesn't prove that it's right. That just means they all do
Mhm.
it. I mean, you and
Yeah,
I spend more money on internet cable and we could save millions of starving people's lives by giving them money to feed them. It doesn't mean it's right that we all do that. It sometimes just because everybody does it, or take these
right.
societies that you say are a sign of Western prosperity and civilizational advancement. About almost 100% of the unborn with Down syndrome are aborted in those societies. They're almost completely wiped out. I think 100% of them in Iceland and Finland went down. So is that what you would call your ethics? That is an ethical society, since you held them
Sure.
up as an advanced society, that they have completely wiped out Down syndrome people?
Sure.
If
So, oh,
they
Adam,
cannot exist, they do not get a name. They're gone forever, all of them. And that sits well with you ethically as an advanced society?
well, my point about like people accepting it and why that matters is not that people saying that something is right makes it right, but that the effect, like the consequentialist effect, or the
Mm-hmm.
why would I say that?
The fact is the
The
effect is that we got rid
consequences.
of all those Down syndrome people. Is that a good effect?
Well, what I'm saying is that the consequences of people allowing abortion do not seem to be negative on the pursuit of ethics. The consequences of killing people who are already born does seem to be negative, because we have so much more of an empathetic connection with people who are outside of the womb. If you think about someone who's inside of the womb, it's very, very difficult to empathize with that, because you can't see them, you can't talk to them, you can't hear them, you can't smell them, anything
Mm.
like that. And so it's hard to
But
empathize with that. And
I can have empathy for them. So maybe if you could open your
sure, but
mind to
I
finding
don't know if
empathy.
it's as much of an empathetic thing as a philosophical thing for you. Or like, I don't
It's
know if you're,
definitely also philosophical, informs us, but then that would also mean
but
maybe
I
it's
guess
also
that's,
philosophical for
oh my.
you to be able to gain the empathy.
Uh, yeah.
Doug,
Um,
just on the Downs thing, you're saying that you disapprove of people aborting Down syndrome fetuses. I don't. When exactly are they able to find out if a woman's fetus has Down syndrome?
When they do the amniotic fluid test is one way, and the other way is through the first sonogram. They can tell by the size at the base of the skull if it's in the danger zone.
So is it a late term abortion technically?
No, absolutely not.
It's first
No, they can do it
trimester.
First trimester.
Okay,
Maybe first trimester.
So I've heard a lot of pro-life advocates say that they would prefer if the woman carries the baby to term and then gives it up for adoption. The Down syndrome case strikes me as interesting because, I mean, would you be in favor of the woman carrying a Down syndrome baby to term and then giving it up for adoption? Because that child would most likely end up in a foster care situation and could be much, I mean, it could be much worse.
Yeah. Well, that opens up a whole other can of worms, which would be making adoptions easier. But it's not like our adoptive homes, and our church has a huge adoption charity that places kids both in our church and encourages people to adopt and helps and raises scholarships to help people in need adopt. It's not that there's a bunch of Down syndrome kids waiting in the adoption agency.
No, because they're being aborted, technically.
Well, no, but the ones that do live are actually regularly adopted by adoptive parents.
Really?
Almost all of these arguments about the kids are, when you actually check the facts, it's not there. There are families that are there to regularly adopt handicapped kids. It's really age has a bigger problem with adoption than health or mental health or whatever.
Okay.
It's
interesting.
It's harder to adopt out an older kid. They're the abandoned kids in our society.
Yeah. I'd be interested in talking maybe more about your position a little bit.
Sure.
Well,
I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to run away from my argument.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that we can move on until we fully understand your position, Andy. Maybe you don't understand your position specifically. I mean, I would let go
It's not a very common position, so there aren't a lot of people who've written books from this position. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to understand, I guess.
Yeah.
Certainly, some lives have more value than others in your mind, correct? Your life, for instance, might have inherent value, or
maybe, but that's difficult because, again, like, you have to think about, like what I said earlier, like, if you kill everybody except for the philosophers will still die because they don't have food. Like, just because the philosophers are the philosophers and scientists, let's say, because if we're looking for moral realism, then it should eventually be scientific, which again, I think is not going to be the case, but I can't be absolutely certain. So anyway, if you kill everybody except for the scientists and the philosophers are not going to be able to eat. They're going to die anyway. So you have to have a society. You have to think about it consequentially.
Let's set aside this argument just because let's just pretend for the sake of argument that you believe some life has inherent value, okay? These debates usually come down to when does life begin? That's where most of the argument is. So if you're saying life has no inherent value, then you can't even really have that argument. So just for the sake of argument, let's say life has inherent value.
Most pro-choicers believe life has inherent value.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to argue the pro-choice.
But the difference is often, I mean, they want to say, when does life begin? The argument is over, which has more value. A lot of people will say, embryos don't have any inherent value. I'll point out, Doug, in your position, like IVF is not even really a possibility because in IVF, you're producing, 10, 20, 30 embryos and selecting from those embryos.
That's right.
So each one of those has, and I don't know where exactly you're defining the line of conception, but technically embryos, I mean, they're not.
Yeah, I do believe by the time you have conception, I believe life begins at conception. So by the time you have an embryo, you have a differentiated person. That is, that person, they're not interchangeable with any other person. Their trajectory of life will go on and on. So I do know that there are couples who will only practice in vitro if they promise to adopt out the eggs. I mean, the embryos, sorry.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And they can plant them on other people. But most
they're donor
in vitro,
embryos.
where they discard them, I could not do that.
Okay.
Okay. So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you value life? You talked about in your original little thing, you talked about individuals are rare and valuable and unique. So do you value life positively? Like, do you think that more unique life is better?
Wow, I don't know about that, although I do believe that everyone should have children. I mean,
Okay.
I think I think people inherently are wonderful. They have the mark of God on them, that there's something miraculous about every single person. They're amazing. Even the immoral ones are a profound, amazing creation that, they may choose to go bad, but their capacity to do good is also amazing. The capacity of every person to do amazing good and amazing evil
Okay.
has been demonstrated over and over again. So yeah, there's something about that is inherently high value, and I'm automatically askance at any position which is all too common in man's history, where we deny the humanity of the other and we start saying he's 3/4 human, not quite valuable, not quite worth fighting for in the way that I'm worth fighting for and valuable, when all of us have been on that exact same trajectory of starting as an embryo. Every single person that you see was once an embryo.
So I guess where I was trying to get with that is the idea of, let's say a mother has a pregnancy
Sure.
and she's not ready, but she knows she will be in a couple of years. And so she decides to abort the child that she has, and then she has another child a couple of years later that she would not have if she had not
That's true.
aborted the first child. So now the result is pretty much the same. We have another unique person. We have added one more unique person. And the result is the same both ways in that sense, but it's better if she did the abortion because the child grows up with a better life because she's more prepared to take care of it. So, like, how do you deal with that kind of situation?
Describe a better life, and what evidence do you have that it'll have a better life?
Well, I'm just saying in this situation, it's a hypothetical, but I'm sure it happens. The mother, she's in financial trouble or something like that. Let's say her partner left her or something like that. So she's in a rough spot. She knows she's probably not going to be able to raise the child as well as she could in a few years. And so she aborts it, has another child later, and is able to raise it with better financial stability. Let's say that's the thing that changes, is financial stability or something like that. But the idea here is, like, if an abortion results in still ends up with an extra life, another unique person down the line, was the abortion still a bad thing because the result was still a new unique person?
The first abortion would still be murder. It would still be the unjustified killing of innocent human life. That a murderer can go on and have a good life is still true. No matter what murder you commit, you can still go on and do great things and still do good things. But I don't believe that the ends justify the means. They don't justify the original murder. It just means that, yeah, they can still go on. And I would also argue that in no way can that mother know that baby will absolutely be the kind of life-ruining event to justify blotting out an entire human existence. In fact, we have most of our heroes came from abject poverty, guys who go on to create cures of diseases, great scientists, great people, great presidents. Some of them came from the kind of abject poverty that we can't even imagine. And the idea that their mothers would abort them, you'd wipe out, say, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, probably even Jesus, presidents, Hamilton, orphans and things. So I'm saying you can find a lot of counterfactuals that just because someone is born in a difficult situation doesn't mean they'll continue and by absolute fact continue down a bad situation.
Sure, but don't you think it's more likely? Like, don't you like? Are you saying that? As I feel like it's not more likely for a child born into poverty to do something great for the world than it is for someone not born into poverty. So it seems to me like the value that you actually get from the second birth would be equal or greater. But let's just suppose it's equal to the first one.
How can it be equal to? How can one human being be equal to two human beings?
No, I mean like the first child who was aborted would it be consistently the case that they, or let's just say, would it tend to be the case that that first child would turn out better in some way than the second one?
Yeah, I'd have no reason to think that the second child would turn out better than the first.
Yeah,
or the
okay,
first one would turn out worse than the second.
But neither the other way, right? Or not the other way either, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The first
Neither
child
way.
wouldn't turn out better than the second. So what I'm saying is that seems like a pretty neutral situation with regards to valuing unique life in a positive way, where you say more unique life is better. So in this case, we have two options, which both result in an extra unique life. One of them involves abortion, and one of them doesn't, but the results are the same. So
it's not the same in that you did something profoundly wrong in wiping out the first life.
Right, but is it really profoundly wrong if the result of it is still another unique life? Because that second child wouldn't have been born if she hadn't aborted the first,
I don't think that's a justification for taking a human life. That
okay,
even if that were the case, and for instance, the early slave owners said, we get free labor on our land, and if you take this free labor away from us, then you will collapse the entire South's farming. And so you could make that same utilitarian case of saying, look, if we just see past this one evil of owning a human being, we can keep the South from going into economic collapse. And I'm only saying, yeah, they may be prosperous in their farming. It does not remove the horror of owning a human being to do it.
I don't think that's an equivalent situation at all, because the hypothetical that I supposed was one where we have like equal values, and it's obvious that they're equal value in some way, in some sense. Whereas the slavery thing, it's like there's no way to rationally compare the two, of like the value of the human lives versus the value of the economic prosperity of the South. It's like that's not an equatable.
You kill one human life, right?
Yeah.
The first human life you kill.
Yeah.
And then the second one,
here's the thing though, is
can better prosper.
So here's the question then, is do you value life?
And by the way, you're right,
basis?
Andy, that those are not equivalent, in that your situation is actually much more immoral than what I was proposing on the farmers owning people.
But let me step in for a second here, Doug. I'm sympathetic to this argument, and people do bring up the slavery argument. The question that I have, are you familiar with the argument that they put forward in the book Freakonomics about how abortion? So just to explain this argument to the audience, they're making a hypothesis that once abortion became illegal, women were allowed to abort these children. That what Andy is kind of intuiting here is that these children that are born into bad situations often go on to become criminals. And the argument that they make in Freakonomics is the reason why the crime rates have dropped precipitously throughout the 90s and they're going lower all the time is that women are allowed to have these abortions, and these babies that would be born into bad situations are never born. So there is a societal impact there that, we don't, I mean, we need to do more study, obviously, to find out if this is correct. But just for the sake of argument, let's say that this study is correct, and your position will lead to more crime. The slavery argument is a different argument, because the incentives were aligned. Slavery was actually holding the economy back. So once slavery became illegal, it was technically better for society. Do you see the difference in those positions?
Right, Adam, but that's not what made it immoral. It's we would have ended slavery even if it would have put us into a complete financial crisis. It wouldn't have still been justified. So I'm removing that pragmatic argument. I'm saying
So your argument is not flexible to the societal outcomes whatsoever. So just for the sake of argument, if abortion is made illegal and crime gets out of control, the United States drifts into third world status, you would still think we were making the correct course of action.
Right. Genocide is not an answer. And Freakonomics, what they really proposed actually was a racist argument, because by far you have a higher abortion rate in the Black community, which was where most of those abortions came from, which is where most of the crime came from. And that's what lowered the crime in those communities, was they were specifically talking about aborting a higher percentage of Blacks. And I could also make a steelman argument and say, like, the amount of Blacks that we've killed since Roe v. Wade, as far as of the 40 million people aborted, the highest percentage of Blacks, if you look at someone's voting record, you're far more likely to vote according to your family's tradition. So really, even if you're a woke Democrat, you've aborted so many woke Democrats that you could have had Democratic presidents just by sheer voting if you didn't kill off all of your voters. That you could make a moral case for that, even if I wanted to make that argument, that, you know, if you believe that that's the future, is to remove the presidency from Trump, then quit killing your voters, because you've killed the highest percentage of them.
Here's the thing, though. This is back to kind of the policy argument, is that would those abortions have been prevented if we had pro-life policies? I don't think so, because women are going to get abortions regardless.
But that's borne out as false, Andy, just by looking at the number of abortions before Roe v. Wade and after.
Well, the number of reported abortions.
Yeah, that's what they always hide behind. But the statistics are clear. And the people who came up with those statistics, they came out and said that they were flat out lying about 150,000 abortions a year before Roe v. Wade. By the way, it jumped up to 700,000 to 1 million a year after. It's just clear cut, a huge expansion of abortion with the legalization, with Roe v. Wade. And before it, there was about 2, and I can even make a pro-woman case that you're saying that it's terrible, that we would lose, say, 2,000 women a year to back alley abortions. Those statistics have been exaggerated, and they also didn't know how many there were. They were taking a guess. They were guessing between 10,000 and 100,000. The number goes up from there.
Okay, that number, I calculated that number from the number of current, that's like a current statistic about how many women die from illegal abortions around the world. And then I just,
2 things they'll never tell you. One, that all of those quote unquote back alley abortions didn't actually take place in a back alley, but were performed by an abortion doctor. So they were called back alley abortions, even though they were illegal, but you'd still go to a sympathetic doctor to get an abortion. So it was quote unquote safe, legal, and rare. And the actual abortion industry didn't change that much when Roe v. Wade actually went legal. It was the same kinds of abortions. They were just made legal. So they weren't done with a clothes hanger in the alley. They were done in a clinic where a doctor would remove your fetus. That's number one. Number two, they don't tell you that today more women die from the widespread use of abortion, safe, legal abortions, than ever did under back alley abortions.
Where are you getting that? Where's that from?
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
If you just look up Center for Disease Control or some kind of an abortion statistic, it'll give it to you. This is not a biased thing. This is just a normal medical procedure reporting. If you look at the sheer number of women who die of the legal abortion clinic, more women die of a legal abortion than ever died from back alley abortions, which is why it's not a pro-woman issue.
Okay, but also the population is increased. So is this per capita or what?
Our population always increases, but
I know.
Abortions up to there was no way that abortions could have been performed 1 million a year, which is what we've had for the last 40 years. It's anywhere from 750,000. They're down to about 750,000, but still, it was nowhere near that before Roe.
Doug, last year was about 600,000.
Legalizing abortion creates abortion.
Doug, you're making the claim that it seems just crazy to me on the face of it. You're making the claim that more women die now of abortion, like abortion from an abortion clinic, than died from sympathetic doctors giving abortions when
back alley abortions.
Quote unquote back alley abortions.
Yeah.
You're saying more people die now?
It might just change your position if I'm right, right?
Well, no, I'm wondering, it seems like, okay, that is probably a population difference because there are more abortions happening. So, or there are more people. I mean, if there's 10
of women who died,
right,
more women die because of the legalization of abortion after Roe.
Yeah, but it could be that the population is 10 times, like there's 10 times the population now. So if one woman died when there was, there would be 10, if the same percentage
No,
of people die,
Yeah, we haven't grown 100-fold since Roe v. Wade. The numbers are clear. It is exposing yourself to that procedure, which is a dangerous procedure.
right?
It is dangerous compared to other procedures.
Yeah, but you're
I'm
making
just
it
saying.
Okay,
you're
but
making it sound like it's
you're
like
saying that
bypass surgery or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, it is a relatively risky procedure, and it's a lie to say that it is safe, legal, and rare or whatever. It's like it is not. The number, if you're talking about the sheer number of women, and which is the most pro-woman thing that keeps the most women around, making abortion illegal would help.
We'll definitely look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I be clear on this? Are you saying that legal abortions today have
Yes.
a higher fatality rate for the woman than illegal abortions before Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, that
I'm
seems
saying more women died
okay. So
after Roe
Yeah.
than before regarding abortion.
because of population growth.
And because the number of
Not
abortions
population growth, just because of
presumably
the
went up as
number
well.
of women who went out and got more abortions
Okay.
because it was made legal. And there's a lot of other factors that combine with that, with like the sexual promiscuity that came into our society from the late 60s, early 70s, and things like that, which made women more likely to get pregnant, lowering marriage statistics, which made women more likely to have get pregnant and want to end the pregnancy. Yeah, there's all these combining factors that make it very complicated. But
Okay, I'm looking at NCBI NLM NIH .gov,
Yeah.
and this is saying 24 women died from hemorrhage after legal abortion in the U.S. from 1972 through 1979. 24 in those 7 years, and during that 7 million legal abortions were reported to the CDC.
What site is that? I'm sorry, I don't want to.
This is this is that one site that has so many periods in it. I don't know why, but it's www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov, and it has all sorts of medical stats.
Yeah, that seems out there, Doug. That seems super out there,
NCBI.
especially since
No, I don't-
we have babies being born preemie, like months and months and months, and they
Yeah.
can still save them, but you're telling me they can't save the woman after an abortion? That doesn't seem logical.
Yeah.
So 24 women in 7 years.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's not like from right now. That was from right around when Roe v. Wade happened.
Yeah.
But it's from like the years right after Roe v. Wade, and that's like 24 women died then in those 7 years.
Yeah,
or is that
I'll have to
8
look up
years?
my statistic. I can't argue it unless I have it in front of me, and I'm not going to look it up.
Yeah,
That's
Sorry.
okay.
I'll
so
concede the point until I get you.
Can I bring up an interesting point that I want to talk about? Is I presume, Doug, that I mean, I don't know, maybe this is wrong, but I presume you're pro-gun?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I want to compare is kind of an argument that a lot of people make for abortion and an argument that people make for pro-gun, because the best argument I've heard for being pro-gun is basically that, yes, we acknowledge that there are excess deaths that we could prevent if we banned guns, but there's a lot of social good, there's a lot of freedom that comes out of it. So, there are like 30,000 gun deaths per year in the US, which is a very small number compared to the number of abortions.
Mm-hmm.
But we could probably reduce that almost entirely. Let's say we could take out 20,000 of those if we banned guns. Okay, now that also would sacrifice a lot of social good and a lot of freedom. And I mean, I have examples of that in my life. There's like plenty, like I was a Boy Scout, so we had fun with, shooting shotguns and rifles and whatever. And there's like on YouTube, all sorts of social good that comes out of guns, right?
Like women
that's
protecting themselves from rape and from home intrusion.
Sure. I mean, that's iffy because you're way more likely to kill yourself with a gun than anybody else.
They
But
have documented the number of home invasions that are stopped by gun ownership.
Yeah, I just want to compare the arguments here because the argument that like basically guns should be, as legal as they are, because while they do result in a lot of deaths, they also result in lots of social good and freedom for millions of people. But I think that argument can be applied to abortions in exactly the same way, that if we banned abortion, we'd probably save tens of thousands of lives every year, presuming that an unborn child is a life, which let's assume that for now. But we would sacrifice a lot of social good and a lot of freedom. And so I'm interested in the difference between those arguments and what makes, because the right-wing position is like different for those two things, even though that philosophical argument seems very similar. So I'd be interested in
and
that.
I do think that they flow from a respect for human autonomy, both for the unborn, and the reason why we have our gun rights is because it is considered a right to freedom, that you have a right to protect yourself with a appropriate weapon. I mean, we're not talking about something that's
but we also acknowledge that that they result in lots of deaths, and most of those deaths are not self-defense.
Yeah, none of the deaths happened because a gun jumped up and shot someone. It's a
but we also know that if we do ban guns, we can see from every other country that does it, if we ban guns, then we decrease the deaths. We decrease gun deaths.
The deaths go up by knives and hammers in the UK.
This is becoming a gun debate. We're talking about abortion here, guys.
This is such a non sequitur too. I mean, it's I mean, here's what I would say. I would say, fine, take every gun away and make every abortion illegal. There, fixed.
We want to do that trade. Yeah. I mean, it'd probably result.
It would result in 1 million less deaths. I'm pro-life, so fine.
Well,
I will allow you to take every gun away if you make abortion illegal. Everybody happy?
It might help. It might help the future crime rate from these unwanted kids. At least they won't have access to guns.
They just give them a gun as soon as they come of age, anyways.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you familiar? There's one other argument that we haven't talked about. Are you familiar with this, Doug? Are you familiar with this credibility argument? Some people, I noticed there's 3 men here talking about women's reproductive rights as they like to frame it. Some men make the argument that the only way that we will have any credibility, whichever way we go on this issue, is if women are the only ones who weigh in. I don't agree with that argument. I'm curious your position.
Yeah, of course it's false. Of course it's false. First of all, at the very least, if a woman is aborting a male like me, she must consult with me, or her opinion doesn't account on that unborn male's life. So at least there's half the abortions right there, using that argument.
There's also the father as well that I think.
Yeah, and the father. That's another. It doesn't hold water any way you look at it. And it's and by the way, all these bad abortion arguments were invented by men. They were not invented by women. It's a marketing plan by men. Men want abortions more than women do. Men by far, because we want to be able to bang what we want and not have to pay our dues. Hey, lady, I'll pay for the abortion. Is the great American male's favorite state bird.
Yeah. You know the life begins. Just give me a second, Andy. You know the life begins at conception argument. Doug, do you make? Is that an argument that you make?
Yes.
I mean, that's typically what's going on. Is that you, Andy? What?
Oh, sorry.
The life begins at conception argument is typically a religious argument. It's
sure, but scientists make it. It's a science argument we got it from a science book that said life begins at conception.
How do you? I'm curious how you. One of the questions I was asking on Twitter when I was going to do this was, what are the secular arguments against abortion? There is the crime one from Freakonomics, which we've talked about already, and I was talking to somebody else who was trying to say that DNA is the distinguishing point when life begins, once there's a unique package of DNA.
That's right.
But that to me just seemed like trying to make this life begins at conception argument, which mostly is a religious argument, into a scientific argument. And for me, I don't know if it makes that argument. Like why conception? Why are we fixated on conception?
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds of non-religious atheistic scientists that have said human life begins at conception.
I mean, life does, but if you value life, then presumably you value it through some sort of personhood. Like you don't value, like, you know, you could have,
There's a recent
you know, a skin cell that has the whole like genome in it, like that's a unique human genome or whatever, but the skin cell isn't valuable on its own. So there seems to be some sort of potential involved in this, because I mean, the embryo doesn't have a nervous system, it's not feeling things, it's not conscious, but it does have the potential to do all that. So is this value a potential based thing?
It's reality. It's you came from an embryo.
Right. So when we're valuing the embryo, we're talking about the potential that the embryo has, and that's what's valuable about it, right?
Absolute. That if left to its own recourse, if you don't kill it, the ones that aren't naturally aborted will make it to you. I mean, no one we know who we've ever met has not gone through that. And so that is part of the normal human experience. That is the fully human experience.
Right. So is this a potential value thing?
Well, I'll give you one example that might be a good parable. In California, there's the California condor, and it was brought, nearly to extinction.
Yeah. You talked to Destiny about this too. Yeah.
To a point that if you disturbed a California condor nest of eggs, they would fine you.
Yes, they would fine you.
If I
one at a time, guys.
If I broke and killed a condor egg, even though that's just a fertilized egg, I would be tried as if I killed a condor, because everyone knows that you don't get a condor without that egg. And so why suddenly pro-choicers act so ignorant, as if they forgot that human beings, where we come from, of course you're wiping out that human's entire life if you kill an embryo. Of course.
So it is a potential argument. So
it's not a potential, it's what it is. It's why you can find.
I know. I'm not saying like the argument is potential. I'm saying the argument is that the value of an embryo is in its potential to be a human.
I disagree. That puts some kind of utility on where he's going to end up. It's that is a fully human, 100% human, as human as you can get at that development stage being. And there's no percentage. He's not 1% not human. It's 100% human. It doesn't get any more human than that. At every stage, by the way, babies aren't fully developed, and they're not less valuable because they're 1 day old than an 80-year-old man.
Sure.
Well, just in terms of investment, though, it seems logical from a secular perspective that there's more investment the longer you grow.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
Really, I would argue the opposite. Kind of that because so what you just said is that like the human is valuable and equally valuable throughout its life. Okay, so the problem I see with that is that then we have to define personhood somehow. And if they're equally valuable throughout it, like I used to be morally pro-life back when I valued life directly. And the argument was basically that like life is valuable through its potential. Like if you have an unconscious person, killing them wouldn't cause them pain, but they have potential, so you shouldn't, right? And so when it comes to abortion, the idea was like, well, the child has that potential. There's all this life that will happen, but it won't happen if you kill them. So you're taking away all that life. And then the problem I ran into there was that, well, there's also potential for life in like before conception. Like the choice not to have a child in the first place, that's still a potential child that's not there. But on the other hand, if you value someone on an instantaneous basis, then you have the problem of like, well, an embryo doesn't feel anything. It's not a human. It only has the potential of being a human.
I don't argue potential. I argue it's 100% life. Before conception, it is not 100%.
Okay, so then by what criteria is it 100% a human when it's an embryo?
Number one, science. Number two, reason. Number three, logic.
Well, no, those. Come on, Doug. What are the reasons? What is the logical argument? What does science say?
Science says that human life begins at conception.
Well, how does it say that?
I mean, I have to look it up. But if you want me to sit here and Google, and you guys can keep yourself busy.
No, don't do that. But I'm just saying, like, My question is, it does seem at some level arbitrary. Like we're always balancing the needs of society against the needs of the individual. Now you have a very individualistic argument here. I mean,
It's not individuals. It's here. I just looked up
Well,
Princeton.edu.
we've even
Development
said
of the embryo begins at stage 1 when sperm fertilize the oocyte, and together they form a zygote.
Yeah, no, I know how human reproduction works. The 30%.
Then why are we acting like we don't?
Well, 30% of the embryos are conceived and they don't actually implant in the vaginal wall. So that's right. 30% of humanity, by your criteria, is being holocausted every single year.
Not
just
holocausted.
by nature.
They die by natural causes, exactly like a 97-year-old person died.
But we race in and do everything we possibly can to save that human being. Like sometimes more than we should. Like, why aren't we racing in to save that potential? In those
more should. How much should you try to save a human life?
What's that?
How much should you try to save a human life?
Well, I'm just saying, by your argument, it seems like we should invest a lot of resources into making sure that human being makes it from the fallopian tube to the vaginal wall.
No,
it's not a very pragmatic argument.
No, I think we do already do what we can. Like, women are encouraged not to drink alcohol. But also, when a 97-year-old man is in some kind of crisis, we try to save him. Or if a crippled person gets in a car wreck, we do everything we can to save them from a fire. You don't say that person's crippled and that person over there is not, so go save the person that's not. That is just like normal human. No,
you're making my argument.
Valuing human life.
You're making my argument.
Yeah, that's a scientific argument of humanity.
Well, my argument is when we're trying to save the crippled people and the old people, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing that to the 30% of embryos that are conceived and do not safely plant in the vaginal wall? Those are lost souls.
But they're not dying by the hand of another. They die naturally.
So dying by the hand of another is part of the criteria.
Yeah, it's called murder. You don't go to jail if a rock falls on your friend.
Right.
You go to jail if you stab him and end his life. So by natural causes. You don't go to jail if your grandpa dies at 97 by natural causes.
Right, but you
might die if you don't feed him for a month. You might go to jail.
So can I ask a question? Yes. With this embryo, if we're not using a potential basis, then presumably we could take away the potential to become a human that walks around and is conscious or like has a nervous system, let's say, and it would still be valuable. Is that the case? Like, if the embryo doesn't have the potential to actually become a human, that it's still valuable?
I think the embryo, a fertilized embryo, is fully human and fully 100% as valuable as anybody else.
Okay, even if it's never going to actually become a human that can.
Well, we don't know which one will or which one won't. But even when they go, I mean, parents rightfully mourn.
Okay, we don't know which one will and which one won't, but that's still. That sounds like we're valuing it based on its potential again. This is like the central problem that I find with the philosophy of pro-life is that if we value it potentially, then we run into problems like that we can really only solve with the teleological moral framework, which most pro-life people don't use. But if we value it instantaneously, then nothing makes sense anyway, because then we're just talking about, a group of cells that has value regardless of its potential, just because it has some human DNA.
Yeah, it's not just because of human DNA. You're a group of cells also that has potential.
Well, some realized potential as well. That's my argument.
More potential. You have more, and your value doesn't increase with the more potential that you hit. Like, if you cure cancer next week, you don't become more valuable. You're just as valuable. You're just as valuable as you were when you were a zygote. My problem with pro-choicers is we're sitting here arguing over naturally aborting zygotes, and really they use that to open the door, and then you're killing babies on the operating table. Like no one wants to argue the day before birth abortion, which is fully legal in this country because of our court system. No one goes there. We're over here in zygote abstract land.
No
It's not
one
legal in
goes
most
there
states.
because no one goes there because it's generally nobody is in favor of that.
Yeah,
So-
no one's going to defend infanticide, but that is argued. You can argue that on similar grounds of that unborn baby has no
nobody's arguing that though.
ethical impact.
Okay.
They're not emotionally invested in it. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything for society. Its potential when it gets out will be.
By my argument, you have a 9-month investment with an actual baby that you don't have with a embryo, and also the potential argument. And I'm just trying to understand the arguments here. Like the potential argument in IVF, when you're selecting among embryos, you're selecting for the one that has the most likelihood of success.
That's right.
So a lot of those embryos don't necessarily have any likelihood of success.
Right. But I've already stated that I don't believe
You don't agree with IVF, but
I don't believe in discarding what they would call invalid or
Right.
unlikely embryos.
my question is though, it feels just like it's
I'd rather argue ground, Adam, that I do believe in than what I don't.
what's that?
I'd rather argue on grounds that I do believe in than
Right,
what I
right. No, I understand. So you believe life begins at conception. You believe that an embryo, a fertilized embryo, is unique, a unique human being, you said, and has
I believe that's a fact. It is in fact unique. That's a scientific fact. There will be no other like it.
What about twins?
They're unique. Twins that are born are not the same person. They're
Yeah,
different
but they're
people.
the same DNA.
That's what I mean.
They're identical embryos.
You're making a good argument against materialism because they're not their DNA.
But I'm just saying, if you're making an argument that the uniqueness is what distinguishes them,
Yeah.
twins
And you're
are
arguing that identical
twins
twins
are
come out and they have identical lives and they're identical people?
no. But that's after the potential. That's after the that's at the end of the line, not at the very beginning.
The line, it is a through line all the way through. That human beings, when you have a complete human DNA, you have a completely different human being. Even when they're identical twins in the accidents, in the materials, it looks like they're the same. You leave them around long enough and they'll be two completely different people.
Yes,
It's
I agree.
There've never been two identical people.
No, I agree.
So
I agree.
It goes to my argument that these are unique human beings and it's immoral to take one, say like, well, we already got the duplicate. We got the same thing, so nothing lost. We got one the same as two. No, those are two completely different people.
I'm
Two
just
completely different humans.
the pro-life side of the argument seems to me that you're making an argument that a embryo, a fertilized embryo, is equal to a child or a baby.
That's
and I
right.
think that's where people have the most difficulty, because most people don't perceive it that way. And I'm just
But Adam, I have the same emotional difficulty. I don't decide my ethics based on my emotions. My emotions agree that but my emotions are that I want to pay for my cable and I don't see some starving guy dying in Africa. But just because my emotions don't weep with every death that my neglect might cause doesn't mean that something unethical has happened. You can't look at people's perception and emotion to decide if things are true or not. And especially in the case of the unborn. So of course,
agree.
I'll have more vested in my wife dying than an unborn zygote, who just now clicked over to being fertilized yesterday dying. But those emotions don't tell us the actual value of things. Emotions are deceptive. Personal perception is deceptive.
Okay.
For me, pro-life. Go ahead, Andy. It's your.
Yeah, I was just okay. So
We've been going close to an hour too, so let's just go another 5 minutes. It's getting a little.
We can always break it out into another show if you don't want to go long with coming.
yeah, I mean, I'm wondering. So is the choice not to have a child when you could have a child biologically? That's not a problem, right?
Yeah, because you're not killing unborn life. You haven't made it in the first place.
Okay. which means that the value is somehow attained immediately, not through the potential for consciousness or the ability to feel pain or anything like that, but it's valued directly through the genetic information and the materials of the conceived zygote.
Well, I'll
Like,
go beyond materialism. I'll say it has a human soul. It has an immaterial soul.
okay. Well, I mean, at that point, I mean, I don't. That's a religious thing, then, so I don't know what to say to that.
I don't know it to be religious, but I know it's
We don't
all.
have time for
Are
that,
you
so.
just the soul question? Are you saying the soul enters at the time of conception?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I'm saying I believe that I believe that the soul pre-exists the body, that there's a creation of a soul, and that it has something to do with the body being created in that moment.
Right.
So 30% of people just
Yeah, I was gonna say, like the soul people have to be
Go
going,
somewhere,
"Oh
I
my
guess."
God, the roll of the dice here."
Tons of people die in the womb. Tons of people die in the womb.
Yeah, there's
I mean,
also this.
life is rife with being. I mean, I hope this isn't news to people, but most people exist at some point in terrible suffering, and even when the zygote doesn't feel it, it gets wiped out. But there's someone over in some other country, who fell into a hole, and none of us don't know who he is, and we will never know who they are, and they will die anonymously. And their pain and suffering, we don't know anything of it.
Do you know
It's still terrible.
Do you know about vanishing twin syndrome? Do you know about this?
No.
So a large percentage of the embryos form twins, and one of the twins ends up engulfing the other twin.
Sure.
Which is an even crazier situation to consider.
By the way, my grandmother was one of those people. She had a twin's parts, extra organs in her, because she was supposed to be a twin, and she had absorbed it.
So for the next debate, we should debate whether or not we should convict your grandmother of murder.
Yeah. Or we could talk abortion.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
Do
I still don't understand how you're valuing life exactly, but I guess maybe it's just religious, like the soul happens at the zygote and that's that. But that doesn't seem rigorous or convincing to me. So,
Andy, I also value your life with that same religion. So I believe your life is worth fighting for, and I even have a command to die. I'd like to sacrifice my own life for yours.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but at the same time, I still don't quite understand how, like, what is exactly the framework in which you value life. But I guess, I mean, if it's soul based and religious based, we don't have time to really address that. So, oh well.
Yeah,
I'm not. I don't know your reasoning for beyond it just being a religious argument. I don't know your reasoning for placing the life at conception argument that you're making. You said like logic, you said reason and science and those things, but I don't know the tangible argument that you're making.
Sure. And Adam, I can find non-religious atheistic people that believe in they're against abortion.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
So I'm saying there are atheistic or materialist arguments for it. I don't tend to employ those, even though I also have an agreement with those at a minimal standard. You know what I mean? They're a minimal standard. The most powerful argument, or a stronger, more passionate argument that I have, is the unique human being that they will, if they're left alone, they will usually continue to flourish and become full humans, just like everyone else that we know. That's why I stated my position like that. But you will find a higher percentage of religious people, or people who believe in the soul, who will tend to be more pro-life. And you'll also find a lower percentage of people who believe in the human soul and believe that we're just material processes mindlessly clashing into each other, who will tend to believe that abortion is okay. So I do see that happening, but we're not having an argument on if there's meaning outside of the materials.
Yeah, I just think the decision making should be at the level of the person with the most information. So I'm weary to give the state this power And that pro-life position really seems like the more extreme position to me than the pro-choice position. Like, I'm not comfortable with late-term abortions or abortion on demand. All the things that all the places where the pro-lifers have the best argument, I feel. But there are situations, there are just situations, like the Down syndrome situation that you brought up, where I'm not as uncomfortable about women having those abortions, because you really have to weigh that kind of responsibility. And I don't feel like it's for me to place that kind of burden on somebody else. That's a tough decision either way. And it's not a decision I feel comfortable letting the state make.
Yeah, and because I know so many people with Down syndrome whom I love, and it would be a horror if they were gone. And their parents all marvel at how many of them are aborted when they say it's no burden at all, and they're some of the most wonderful people they've ever known. That I think
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you support like universalized birth control, free birth control, and policies to make sure that it's accessible to every woman? Would you support that?
Are you asking Adam or me?
You, Doug.
Would I support it?
Yeah. Because I think I've meant to actually start this whole discussion by saying we agree that there should be fewer abortions, and I think that probably the most effective thing we could do immediately to have less abortions is to universalize birth control.
Oh, it's that argument.
Well, I mean, like, why not?
I mean, as a small government person, I'm against expanding the government into getting.
Okay, but it's not that much. It's like a couple $100 per year per person. That's really not much
for me when you're a small government, guys. Because I'm always suspicious of where the states.
Okay, but we're talking about lives. Like, there will be so fewer deaths if everybody has birth control, right? So we're talking about saving tens of thousands of lives a year, and we're not willing to front like couple $100 for that.
You're wiping out the life. I'm saying, why not? You'd have the same outcome if you just made abortion illegal.
Okay, but people are going to have you can't deny that people are going to have abortions. Even if we can diminish them significantly with pro-life policies, there will still be lots of abortions, and there will be lots less abortions if we have universal birth control.
I disagree. I think you'll have way more, given the widespread use of birth control now and the way it's been pushed through public schools into all of our cities, that you can't expect a horny 15-year-old to put on a condom at the right time or properly take their pills. It doesn't happen. There's just as high of abortion rate where there's a huge presence of all these freebie condoms given away like candy. It's a false argument, in my view.
Really, you don't think it'll help?
It hasn't. We've never had more.
We don't have universal birth control right now, so no, it hasn't.
We've never had more birth control available, and we top out our abortion rates between 750,000 and 1 million a year. So
abortion actually has been going down. We had like 600,000 last year. Let's not exaggerate the numbers.
I mean, I'm sorry, I was off by 100,000, but still we're talking about 600,000 people killed.
Yeah, okay, I know, but let's still say what it is.
We provide universal.
But the point is that it's going down. Like the number of abortions are going down, the population's going up. So it seems that something is going right.
So if we merely had 600,000 slaves instead of 1 million of them, that's a good sign.
It's a little better. My point is that I don't know if I would need to see. I need to see evidence that the birth control is
not for one
pointless. Like, birth control doesn't decrease the number of abortions. That seems tough to swallow to me. But
yeah,
I guess I don't have stats on my side, so
let me step in here. This has been a great discussion. We've just crossed an hour and 6 minutes, so I'm going to give you guys each like 4 or 5 minutes just to have a closing statement. You don't have to take 4 or 5 minutes, but just a brief closing statement, then we'll end it there. You want to go? I think Doug went first, so Andy, you want to go first now?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think for the 2 layers, for me personally, on both layers, I'm pro-choice, but I think the more convincing layers is the legal layer, that we can't really prevent women from getting abortions, and so we might as well make it legal because legal abortions are safer There was some objection to that, but I would need to see stats for that. And then ultimately, like, you know, I had a whole moral spiel, but I don't think that's super appealing. So it'll take a while to flesh out. And, I certainly think this is not quite the audience for it. But yeah, that's pretty much the point. We both want less abortions. I see abortions more as like a symptom of a greater problem. And you see abortions as the direct evil, and also probably a symptom of greater problems as well, but also as a direct evil. And I would say that universalizing birth controls is a good idea for that. I guess neither of us presented stats, so I guess we can't really have a super constructive discussion maybe next time. But yeah, that's the main thing for me, I guess, is that second layer is where the real argument comes in, that can't prevent women from getting abortions. You might as well make it safe. Yeah, there you go.
Doug?
All right. Well, thanks, Adam, for having me on. I appreciate, I'm honored that you'd have me on. I really appreciate it.
No, you did great. Thank you so much for coming on.
And I'd also like to thank Andy for being generous and not
thank you too.
Not hostile and an easygoing guy. So I appreciate it. I would say human life is sacred and ought to be protected. And I believe that human life starts well before birth. It goes all the way back to conception. I think it's a hard position for the mother to have the baby. It's a lot harder to have your entire existence wiped out before you're even allowed to get a name. That's my closing statement.
All right.
All right, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Leave us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have any ideas about future debate questions, I'm doing a debate a week now on this channel, and they're all going to be around the same time on Wednesdays, and I have debates lined up for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So I may even move to 2 days a week if people are interested. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll go ahead and leave it there. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Subscribe, share the link.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Don't subscribe. Unsubscribe. Subscribe to Doug. Take care, everyone.
All
right.